Hola, and welcome to The Get Down. I'm Ritzy P. In this episode's All Things Butterscotch segment with CEO and Managing Editor of Butterscotch Media, Clev Messidor, we'll discuss how Butterscotch Media is headed to the DNC convention in Chicago. And today's guest is Damu Winston, who is the global head of Web3 innovation across Amazon. We'll be discussing Web3 and the future of work, his background as an engineer and a technologist, and so much more. So now let's get into all things butterscotch with Clev Messidor. Welcome, Clev. How are you?
Oh my God, so exhausted, but so excited about everything that's ahead.
Awesome. So I'm excited that we're taking Butterscotch Media on the road. So why DNC convention and not the RNC convention?
Good question. Well, the goal is to expand the bipartisanship narrative, right? In my work over the last 6 years across Web3 and DeFi, I've received bipartisan support. Conservatives like Congresswoman Yoon Kim or Congressman Warren Davidson are not just champions of crypto, they also understand the importance of expanding access. But a majority of progressives have stayed on the sidelines, despite the engagement of, luminaries like Senator Cory Booker or Congressman Darren Soto or Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett or Joyce Beatty and so many others. So we have a lot of work to do to get Democrats and progressives on board, and inclusion is a story that they actually focus on. So that tells me there's a policy story in Chicago during the DNC, and we will be on the ground, up close and personal.
Wow. Okay, so what is the plan for Chicago?
Well, our audience of almost 7,000 already look to Butterscotch Media for content that they know they can't get anywhere else. So we will not disappoint. We're going to do a pre-convention Web3 brunch briefing. It will include a fireside chat and a policy discussion. We'll be announcing our speakers soon. We'll also do live podcast episodes like we did during Consensus in Austin. And we'll also be doing live reporting, spotlighting relevant news, updates, and celebrity political sightings. Additionally, this summer, we are also going to have a presence at the conferences of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists and also the National Association of Black Journalists. So this summer, we have a lot on the docket in addition to the convention.
Wow, how exciting. But for the Midwest audiences, how can they sign up to attend the Butterscotch event on August 18th in Chicago?
Well, the event is free and open to everybody. We do have a registration form on our website, butterscotch.media. So anybody who'll be in Chicago who's interested in going to Chicago, go to our website, look for the Chicago Convention page, and fill out the form. We're excited to have this conversation, to convene this forum, and we're going to have some fun too.
Exciting. Well, thank you so much, Clev, and I look forward to our next discussion about all things butterscotch. Let's welcome our Butterscotch King, Damu Winston. He's the global head of Web3 innovation across Amazon, best-selling author of I Don't Trust You, but Blockchain and Bitcoin Will Help. Hola, Damu. Thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Hola back to you as well. Thank you for having me.
Great. So you have a very dynamic global professional background as an engineer and a technologist. So could you tell us a little bit more about your career adventures?
Sure. Yeah. I started my career many moons ago working for IBM, where I worked on a patent around something called automation development. Years later, that became known as something called RPAs, as in robotic process automation. I ended up working for something called SAS, where I worked on something called complex data. And now the world knows that as big data. And then eventually I found myself working in nuclear energy, worked on one of the largest nuclear energy projects in the world with Duke Energy. And then eventually I moved on to do some interesting stuff between the various banks, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, etc. Found myself in the Middle East maybe about almost 10 years ago. Spent about 8 years out there where I was responsible for a number of interesting projects. The first one being I rolled out the national medical care strategy for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and then also launched the first cross-border payment solution on blockchain in the Middle East back in 2018. I was also a founding member of something called Dubai Blockchain Center, and also at one point trained about, I would say, 2% of all Emiratis on blockchain or really crypto at the time, or for a company I used to own called FinTeachable. We worked with at least the top 30 to 40% of all the Emiratis within the financial services, but I would say 1 to 2% the nation in terms of Emiratis for blockchain. That's why I tell people all the time I played a significant role. And when you think about crypto in the Middle East, I led a lot of interesting work there back in the day. And I've been between Amazon and AWS side of the house for the last 3 years. I came on board about 3 years ago to lead our blockchain practice, which eventually evolved where I became the emerging solutions leader for professional services across AWS globally. And last year, I took on a role as the Web3 innovation leader across Amazon. My primary customer is really real estate, which we have real estate portfolio in the world. And I'm very fortunate enough that I look across Gen AI, spatial computing, and blockchain.
Amazing. Talk about the nonlinear career path. So
Yeah.
let's take it back a little bit. I mean, you've done so much here in the United States and abroad for, education, resource, and everything in Web3. But how did you enter Web3?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting story. So I had a guy named Jim Kittredge. When I worked in Wells Fargo, I worked on the Wachovia Wells Fargo customer conversion, which at the time was the largest bank conversion in history. And Jim was the exec over it. And he had this big plan. He went to Barclays to lead innovation for Barclays back in, this is 2012 or whatever. And so he promised me he was going to bring me with him. And he said, "Hey, Damu, there's this thing called blockchain and Bitcoin. It's going to change the world." And I promise you, back then we had this thing called the CDC, Change Data Capture, which a guy named Milton, who I met at Bank of America, had the patent for. And when I met with Milton, I was like, the CDC thing is really going to change how we look at storing data in databases. And I was like, this blockchain thing, I mean, it's just distributed ledger. Like, I mean, it wasn't a big deal at the time. And so he's like, no, it's just this Bitcoin. You got to get some Bitcoin. And so I looked into it, and I was like, I was so sold on CDC at the time, and having known Milton, who's also a brother, who's also a Kappa, which I am as well, that I was just like, yeah, man, CDC is the future. And it wasn't until I moved to the Middle East where I was working for a company where they wanted to just sell emerging tech. And that's a big thing you see, at least back in the day in the Middle East, where people would invite you out because you knew emerging tech and they wanted emerging tech. So a little fun story real quick. I had a guy who, royal family, invited me in and said, "Hey, Damu, I hear you know blockchain and I hear you know AI. I was like, okay, sure. He goes, well, you give me blockchain, you give me AI. I was like, okay, what's your use case? No, you give me blockchain, you give me AI. And so long story made short, that's kind of at least was the theme back in the day. And so I found myself really just early on getting ingrained into the space. And the company I worked for said, "Hey, we want to close a deal in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia or Kuwait." And so I found myself saying, well, if I'm going to go to these respective leaders, I need to be able to speak to it. So I found myself really quick to all the conferences I can imagine. And I quickly learned that most of the people, at least back then, 2016, 2017, were just really gaslighting. They didn't know what they were talking about. And I felt like if I want to be credible and really know I know the information, the best way to do that, my mother used to always say, the best way of learning something is teaching someone else. And so I found myself really writing the book on the technology, what blockchain was. And so that led to, I guess, my first book. And then that also led to me doing some interesting work in the Middle East. So along the way, I worked on the first cross-border payment solution in the Middle East on blockchain. And that became a big part of my journey. So that's how I got into the space really since 2016, 2017. Then after that, I just found myself doing some really interesting work across the Middle East. So the UAE in particular, and then some stuff in Saudi and Kuwait. But most importantly, Kuwait was the first big one for me.
Amazing. I mean, you probably seen, I've only been in since 2021 and you've been in longer. So you've seen so many iterations, so many people come and go. And you're very passionate about the future of work in the digital age. Why
Absolutely.
is that? Can you explain that a little bit more for us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I because the audience is largely, African American descent, I would say the biggest opportunity gap, whatever the right word is that we have been missed from the conversation. What I mean by that is we haven't been included. And when you're
Okay.
not included, you miss out on the next big thing. In the world we're moving into, things are going to go faster, significantly faster, faster than we've ever seen before in human history. And, what I used to tell leadership within Amazon is that if you see a problem as a leader, you're supposed to do something about it. And I truly believe that the same exponential growth that we're going to see because of emerging technology, right? You're going to see it in terms of, you're also going to see it in terms of the workforce. So, in a simple way of putting it, if we're seeing huge optimization savings when it comes to the product that we're delivering and the solutions that we're building, you're going to see that same exact thing in the people who are building it. So, what that means is if you're already seeing, let's say it's 5% or 8% in the cloud industry of people of color, right? And just cloud. But then look at emerging tech, it's already at like maybe 2%, maybe.
Mm.
So and I say maybe like that. That's a stretch. I would say it's probably 1%. When I was on the AWS, I can honestly say that it was not a lot of us that were in emerging tech, right? Blockchain, spatial compute, robotics, quantum, etc. It's a very few amount of us. And so if we're going to see exponential growth in these fields, then that means the people in it, we're going to see that gap is going to be even wider. If we're not intentional about having people of color in the conversation, learning about the technology, we'll be missed out completely. And therefore, the opportunities that are going to emerge in the future, we're going to be significantly left behind or just missed out completely. And largely, if you think about it, people of color, we typically drive the culture, but we haven't been driving the revenue. We're driving the revenue for the organizations, the companies, but not the
Right.
ones I'm at the most. And so I'm very passionate about this space. Maybe about a year and a half ago, I started working with an organization called the Jobs of the Future, where we host events to try to bring together thought leaders to talk about really this space and what are the jobs that we are seeing. And the big purpose behind it is just exposure yields growth. So the more people are exposed
Okay.
to the opportunities that are out there, the more they can start to create new solutions and be the creators that we are destined to be.
For sure. Please
Yeah.
believe it. So
So
that goes well into this next section. There's that saying that goes, you don't know what you don't know. So when it comes to the future of work, what don't we know that we need to know?
don't know you don't know. Actually, let me break it down into pieces, right?
Please.
There are, I would say, four categories that we don't know. One, identity. Identity is such a foundational concept that most people take for granted. And your
Right.
identity is something that is now global, that you're using everywhere, not just in the US. So in the US, you have a social security number. In other countries, other things. So your digital identity in a global marketplace is just going to become even more powerful, needed. And so that comes with its challenges. So what happens if that global identity is compromised or misused? Now you're affected not just in your local environment, but globally. So identity is going to be a massive thing. Then you have your assets in this digital world we're heading into. So I think the second big thing is your assets. So your identity is one asset, but then you also have other types of digital assets, like if you believe in crypto, or if you believe in fiat, or if you believe in NFTs, or all these other virtual goods. That is another area that I think we need to be thinking a lot about, like what kind of digital assets are going to be very valuable. One example I always give people is think about it like this. Most of us who's probably in your audience, we are either millennials or Gen Xers or baby boomers, right? But the next generation, which is going to drive the future, they're digital natives. And so we valued our physical things. But when your identity is across all these different digital platforms, your digital identity values digital assets and digital goods. So just like in the physical world, I have a license plate that used to have my name on it, right? Back in the day when I was a kid. But my point is I had it because that was like a form of vanity. That was a form of like pride. The younger generation has wearables, digital wearables, or they have skins because they play various games. Those things are extremely valuable because they already are. And you're just going to see more adoption. There's one platform, I don't want to say the name, but they have what 74% of all children in the US between the ages of, I think it's 9 to 13 or 14 that play on that platform per day. 3 out of 5 of the people on that platform change their wearables at least twice a week, if I'm not mistaken, at least twice a week. What they're doing is they're buying digital goods for their digital identity, right? So
Right.
that's the next big thing. The third one is going to be payments. How do you pay in this virtual or this digital environment that's becoming so pervasive? And then the last one is, let me think about it. Let me come back to you. But I just think we're starting to see the emergence of artificial intelligence in everything. And how do you own your data, and how do you benefit because of your unique data and your AI that works with your data? So I think those are, off the top of my head, will be the top 4 things that I'll be thinking about that you need to learn more about, so that you are in the driver's seat versus being in the consumer seat.
Right. So the platform that you will not mention, I am familiar with that because my son is always trying to get me to buy him more wearables. So I totally identify with that. And then you mentioned something about marginalized communities, especially Black and Brown communities. We drive culture. And we need to, we're all aligned here, where we're just trying to share the education and resources and let the people know what they don't know, that how important it is to be in this space so that we're not left behind.
Right.
So for those that maybe stumbled upon this, that are not even in this space and are Black, Brown, Indigenous, how can we tackle this issue? I always explain to folks, maybe you're not thinking about going to tech, but the world is getting more tech centric. So you need to start thinking about it somehow, some way. And we can't get left behind like we were when the first iteration of the internet, we weren't even a thought. So how can we tackle this issue to get more Black, Brown, Indigenous folks into the space?
The first part is you got to get involved. You just got to find a way to do something in the space. Like, couple thoughts. The first one is, I remember back in 2017, I want to say, or 2018, Harvard invested, I forget the total amount it was, but they purchased for their undergraduate class, they purchased 1 Bitcoin for every single undergraduate student. Black and brown or people marginalized communities, we don't normally have access to anything like that at all. No one even thinks like that. So I think the first thing that we need to be thinking about is how do we get the knowledge into the historically Black colleges and other communities like that? How do we get the exposure? Exposure yields growth. So I think the first thing is, how do you get involved? Just be curious. And that was what we call leadership principles, 17 of them. One of them is learn and be curious. And it's actually one of my favorite ones. And the reason being is it's all about, are you willing to invest the time into learning something new? And I think sometimes people are afraid of what they don't know. And so they just wait and sit back. Where I think you got to dive deep. You got to just, have bias for action. Go and figure it out. Go and try to understand what it is. Just don't buy Bitcoin. Understand what is a Bitcoin and how is it created. Then you learn about mining. Oh, okay. There's an opportunity here. Maybe I can make some money off of mining. My point is, the first step is be curious, learn and be curious, and then have bias for action to do more with it. The second part I would say is definitely find yourself a team of like-minded individuals. That, again, they don't have to all be physical anymore, but virtual. Find communities that people who are willing to explore and learn. The thing about, digital world we live in now is you have the TikToks, the Instagrams, the Twitters, etc. find your community, find your tribe, and see where they are, and see how you can just get involved in those communities. Because if you don't have a team, you are in a solo journey, and life is better when you got a teammate to drive with, right?
Right.
That's why I like to tell people in the car, you got a driver's seat and a passenger seat. That's for a reason. So you're not alone. You're not alone. So find your teammate, your tribe, and build around that.
Love that. So is there anything else that you want to compel the audience to consider when it comes to preparing for the future of work? Is there anything else you want to add to what you just broke down for us?
I would say off the top of my head, number one thing is just bias for action. Do something. Don't sit back and wait and let it come to you. That's the worst thing to do. My mother used to always tell me this. She would say that it's not about what you do in the peaks that determine your future. It's about the valleys, because in life, everything happens in peaks and valleys. So building when you're in the valley is the most important thing you need to be doing. So if you find yourself
Right.
out of a job, or you find yourself thinking about the next job, right now is the best time to be building, because eventually when the current comes again, you'll be best positioned with the foundation that you can build on top of that. So my mother, I'm very blessed to say I had an incredible mother who gave me a lot of the insights that I live with today, the foundation. And so I stand on her shoulders today. So she built a
Mhm.
foundation for me. And I think that's the most important thing, that always be building. Always, always.
No.
You never know when that thing you built a year ago or 2 years ago is going to add significant value. And it always does. It always comes back in my experience.
That's beautiful. And, my son's only 11, so I hope when he's your age, he talks about me the way you talk about your mom. I think that's beautiful. I see you have a lovely pin on your lapel. It's
Yeah.
very interesting. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I wear this for breast cancer awareness. My mother passed away from breast cancer back in 2020. And so I wear this to bring awareness, and that I'm, obviously very proud of my mother, and even now get emotional about it. So two things. One, I truly believe that you need your parents, both or mom and dad, but mothers have a special place for, I think, all men, and I always miss my mom.
Well, condolences to you. My mother passed away in the 90s from breast cancer, so I could totally relate to that. And I'm so happy to see a young man such as yourself bringing awareness, because we need that, especially in our communities. So what's a fun fact that maybe people don't know about you?
I got a lot of them, I guess. I tell people I'm shy, but no,
Are you?
no, I am. I mean, I'm an extrovert when I need to be, an introvert when I need to be, right? So I
Got it.
would say a fun fact is my name, Damu Winston. Got it from my mom, obviously. It means one who brings happiness to his people.
Wow. Powerful. That's very powerful. Okay, so wrapping it up, let's let the audience know the best way to get in contact with you.
I'm not on any social media platforms. I'm just kidding. No, I'm on all. Damu Winston. That's pretty much it. I would say the best way to contact me would be LinkedIn. Other than that, it may be hit or miss. And, I get a lot of messages even on LinkedIn. So just be persistent. But I would say the best way to reach me would be on LinkedIn, Damu Winston, or damuwinston.com. I think that's still available.
Awesome. Your site for sure. Well, thank you, Damu, so much. Muchísimas gracias for sharing your story and your time. And special thanks to our Butterscotch queens and kings out there for joining the conversation. And be sure to check out all of our inaugural episodes that are out now on all platforms, including YouTube. Until next time.